I have a pregnancy. Stay away from returning. I am carrying Stephen's child. She spat. Bella, it isn't possible. You are to blame. You neglected your spouse because you were too preoccupied with looking after your mother. You caused this for yourself, Julia exclaimed with victory. I didn't flinch, though. I made use of her "don't come back" statement. Are you serious? I would be delighted. Stephen and Julia were taken aback by my unexpected response. Bella, what are you saying? Are you not upset with me for cheating? Although at first stunned, I'm not angry. Also, I recently moved to a new location. A new location? What is that? Yes, I need to go somewhere else. I can hand Stephen over to Julia. I no longer have faith in him. I said to myself in a whisper, and little did they realize that a great catastrophe was in store for them. I'm Bella, a 43-year-old housewife who works in the building industry. Julia and I have been friends since we were little and have played together ever since. We both turned into fairly crazy, delinquent pals by middle school. This continued until our high school graduation, but after that, we had quite separate lifestyles. As a child, I detested studying, but in my 20s, I put a lot of effort into earning credentials while working. My career took off in my 30s as a result of this payoff. Julia, meanwhile, claimed that it would be a shame to not enjoy life and spend her 20s and 30s simply having fun. There we were, both over 40 and single. Julia, though, appeared unconcerned. I lost my dad at a young age, therefore I was raised by a single mother, unlike her. My goal was to marry and return the favor to my mother. There were many males at work, but most of them were married. I asked my employer, in passing, if he knew of any decent single men. He introduced me to a buddy of his who was single and about my age. He was Stephen, a construction firm owner 2 years my senior. Having inherited the business from his parents, he had a sober and polite appearance. Like me, Stephen was always focused on his work. It seems that his hectic schedule of job and education had prevented him from being particularly interested in marriage up until this point. We clicked because we had similar interests, and we started dating. We agreed to be married after a year. I informed Julia that I was engaged. Are you serious? Bella, that's excellent. Many congratulations. I'm grateful. I apologize for marrying you. It is not a concern. Julia responded, genuinely glad for me. Just be happy. Many thanks. You have to attend the wedding. Yes, I'm excited about it, Julia answered. The only thing left to do was get ready for the wedding after telling Julia. I will be going to Stephen's childhood house for the first time tomorrow. I was thrilled and had a joyful dance in my heart. But I quickly discovered that my happiness was fleeting. I prepared myself and got ready determinedly the next morning. I was thinking about Stephen's boyhood house. Despite being referred to as his boyhood home, Stephen really lived alone in this property, as his parents had already died away. Still, I was interested in the surroundings in which he was raised. I'd always wanted to go to his place, but he'd never extended an invitation. His home was at the base of a mountain, which looked to be a considerable distance from mine. Though it was a difficult location to locate, Stephen volunteered to pick me up. Since I had a car, I had intended to get there right away after receiving the information. Stephen remarked shyly, "Well, it's quite rural, so you might be surprised," as he drove. No, I choose calm environments over the crowded ones. It must be tranquil if it's in the country. I'm eagerly anticipating it. I tried to lighten the situation by saying this, but all Stephen did was tilt his head and murmur reluctantly, as if he didn't want me to get my hopes up too high. However, I was excited at the mere prospect of going, because it was the home of the person I love. After more than an hour of driving, we arrived in a gloomy bamboo grove in a nearby county, which was nothing like the serene landscape I had expected. We finally came to a stop near what appeared to be an abandoned building. "We're present. This is my home," he declared, pausing in what seemed to be a wrecked garage. An ancient mansion that appeared to be almost a century old stood in front of us. This house is... Yes, this is where I belong. Well built, but a little dated, Stephen said. With my mouth open, I surveyed the vast estate with a modest one-story wooden building. I foolishly believed that when we were married, we would relocate. But what came next surprised me, Stephen. Enter now. Don't be bashful. This will be our home going forward. What? After we are married, will we reside in this house forever? I questioned Stephen while dizzy. It's almost a 2-hour drive from my office. Bella, you are free to leave your employment after our marriage. My salary is more than enough and covers our daily expenses. Stephen said something unexpected that stunned me. Though we had discussed our careers previously, he had never expressed his desire for me to leave my work after marriage. However, I have told you that I enjoy what I do. Why would you assume that I ought to resign on your own? I inquired. Well, isn't it normal for a woman to stop working and take care of the home once she marries a man with a good income? Asked Stephen, appearing perplexed. I figured you would get it without my having to say it because my mother did the same. I was astonished, wide-eyed as I stood there. I was surprised to see, in this day and age, a man with such antiquated views. This location was far from my family's house and my company's. It would be really inconvenient to move so far away from where I presently reside, to our family home with my mom. I wanted to talk about this, but I ran out of things to say right then and there. And this home was next to it. Although the house is well built, considering its age, there are several areas where the flooring is uneven and the walls are collapsing under your feet. There aren't many rooms, and the antiquated bathroom and toilet would be troublesome if we had children. Is this a place fit for us to dwell in forever? Stephen attempted to reassure me when he noticed my frightened look. It's all right. Traditional American homes have a certain charm that may take some getting used to at first. You'll quickly begin to feel at ease. I was trying to find the right words to indicate that wasn't the problem. I begged to be brought home before it got too late, and chose not to say anything for the time being. You are welcome to remain overnight. It's not far, Stephen remarked jokingly, but I had no desire to remain. I got into bed early that night and pondered under the blankets. That's correct. We can always relocate later, even if we first reside in Stephen's family house. Since I've been working for a while and have some savings, Stephen most likely has enough money to construct a new house. I was going to talk to him about this the next time. I discussed the possibility of moving to a new place with Stephen on my next day off, but he didn't seem all that interested in it. Why? We already have a house, so moving is a waste, Stephen remarked. The only thing on his mind was moving into his own home. Was I being ridiculous to worry about how convenient my family's house and place of employment were? I sensed irritation. I didn't grow to detest Stephen, though, and the wedding was still planned. Being in the construction business, our wedding was extravagant. Of course, Julia was there as well. Julia caught a lot of attention from the males at the event since she was attractive and youthful-looking. Is that beautiful woman Bella's best friend? Even the groom, Stephen wondered. Even though I was the bride, I had a small jealousy complex with Julia. Our married life officially started after the ceremony proceeded without a hitch. Stephen felt at ease in his familiar house. Reluctantly, I left my work and became comfortable at home. However, I was a little nervous, so I prepared a plan. The hospital where my mom was admitted called me one day. She was taken to the hospital after becoming unexpectedly unwell. I ran over and went into her room. Mom, are you okay? She apologized for worrying me. She didn't have a nice complexion. It appeared from her conversation with the doctor that she was not in good health and would require a prolonged stay in the hospital. I spent some time with my mother at home. I prepared my belongings and informed Stephen that I would be absent for a while to see to her needs. Stephen seemed unconcerned, though. Oh, is that accurate? Okay, go slow. I scowled at Stephen's casual response. Stephen talked as though I was returning home for enjoyment, although I was there to take care of my mom, whose condition wasn't good. Nevertheless, he appeared irritated when he noticed my reaction. What? Why the bitter expression? Was there anything I said incorrectly? No, it's nothing, I retorted, reasoning that since Stephen was raised in a wealthy household, it was certainly unreasonable to expect him to be thoughtful. I hurried back to the hospital and said nothing more. Almost 3 months have passed since my mom's hospital stay. She is still in the same state and requires my presence all the time. The fact that Stephen hasn't paid us a single visit annoys me more. I scowled at what he said, so perhaps he still has resentment towards me. That is really immature if that is the case. As she lay in her hospital bed, my mother gave me a worried look. Bella, how is Stephen doing? You shouldn't be concerned about me. Why don't you spend some time at home? Don't worry, Mom. In an attempt to calm her down, I informed her, I do occasionally go home. In actuality, though, I was nervous. I did go back home to check on things for the first month or two, but Stephen was grumpy and didn't say anything to me. I would merely go back to the hospital after doing some housework. I gradually began to feel as though I wasn't required at home and that Stephen could handle everything on his own. While my mom slept at night, I lay awake and pondered whether things were all right the way they were. I was lost in contemplation for months. Next, I received a call from Julia. Upon checking my phone, I replied, Hi, Julia. A long time has passed. I just wanted to see how you are. It has indeed been a while, Bella. How are you doing? Hearing Julia's voice again after a long time made me feel better. Still, I felt that her answer was a little hesitant. Ah, I'm fine. Ah, okay, she answered, feeling a little heavy-hearted and not knowing what to say next. Julia then ended the quiet moment. Hey, when are you coming back home next? Huh? I couldn't figure it out. I had not yet informed Julia that I was gone caring for my mother. I questioned why she would pose such a question. Still, since it had been so long since she had phoned, I politely replied, What's up, Julia? Did you request a specific item? Oh, no, not anything specific. I only wished to listen to your voice. While we were conversing, I heard a male voice I recognized in the background say, Hey, Julia. With a start, she said, Ah, and hung up quickly. That voice? Is that it? A shiver went down my spine. I had not returned home for more than 3 months. I decided to return home the next day, as a horrible sensation began to set in. I rushed and returned to my residence the next day, following the hospital's morning rounds. Stephen was supposed to be home because it was Sunday. When I got there, the garage where my car was meant to be was filled by a bright red sports car. This vehicle appeared to be recognizable. I noticed fashionable high heels in the entryway as I opened and went inside the front door. My intuition seemed to be correct. Stephen, are you here? When I yelled out from the doorway, Stephen appeared startled. Why did you return so quickly, Bella? It would have been better if you had phoned. Why is the automobile in the garage with these shoes? Aren't they Julia's too? Ah, well, Julia just so happened to drop by. A very agitated Stephen attempted to clarify. Then Julia emerged from the rear, dressed casually in a jumpsuit. Stephen told her not to come outside, but Julia didn't seem to care. Not at all? Eventually, we must have a conversation about it. Julia appeared to be done trying to hide it. She didn't seem sorry as she stood there arrogantly. Even for the always stylish Julia, her basic ankle-length dress was out of the ordinary. While I was contemplating how her clothing looked like a pregnancy dress, Julia disclosed an unexpected detail. I have a pregnancy. Please don't bother returning. What? Were you not able to hear me? I am carrying Stephen's child. That can't be. As Julia stated this, Stephen groaned and cast a downcast glance at her rebellious stance, Perhaps he wishes I had heard this while he was in a more composed mood. Bella, you are to blame. While you were taking care of your mother, you left your spouse alone. You caused this for yourself, Julia exclaimed with victory. I didn't flinch, though. When Julia saw my composed expression, she pouted and said, "What's the act? I'd heard this residence wasn't to your taste. But I'm okay with it. In addition to having a big yard and no annoying neighbors, the ancient house boasts Stephen, who is both affluent and friendly." Perhaps feeling more confident after receiving accolades, Stephen abruptly altered his demeanor. "I fell for Julia at first sight at the wedding, so I thought I'd ask you to leave since you dislike this house, and I'd live with Julia." Exactly, and Stephen gave me a call after seeing my contact on the guest list. He urged me to come over and claimed you weren't coming back. At first I was apprehensive, but how could I refuse him when he so desperately needed me? "Ah, I see," I casually said in response to Julia's self-aggrandizing tale. "Huh, it seems like you're just acting tough. You have to be angry. Again, I tell it. I am carrying Stephen's child. Please don't return here." Julia smiled as she stated this, and I chose to accept her offer. "Are you serious? I would be delighted to." Stephen and Julia were both taken aback by my unexpected response. "Bella, could you please clarify? Are you not upset with me for lying?" Stephen asked. "Well, I was surprised at first, but I'm not really mad. Besides, I already have a new house. A new home. What are you saying?" Stephen was perplexed, so I continued my explanation. "Actually, ever since we were married, I've been searching for a new home. Yes, we may live here for the time being, but what will happen to us when we have children? This area doesn't have any schools." Julia's expression conveyed a sudden understanding that she had most likely not given schools any attention before becoming pregnant. "Why didn't you discuss such an important matter with me?" Stephen inquired. "You mentioned that you didn't want to leave this place, so I checked online and at real estate agents on my own. But you shouldn't worry about it now." "What do you mean?" Stephen inquired, still unsure. He did not seem to understand that moving in together was not an option after his affair and getting Julia pregnant. I kept talking quietly despite my thoughts. "Just stay in this house with Julia. You cheated on me and even got her pregnant. Since you're wealthy, you may take the child to a private school that's far away and provide them a daily ride." Stephen gave me a nod of understanding while I was speaking. Julia said, "You seem exceptionally nice, Bella." She was taken aback by my composed manner. "Why are you so tolerant of my connection with Stephen?" "I simply can't trust Stephen anymore, I guess. He never once paid my mother, who has been in the hospital for a while, a visit. I decided to move in with my mother in the new home. I've made arrangements with the hospital for in-home nursing care." "Are you genuinely not upset with the relationship? You're not going to come back to me later?" Still focusing entirely on himself, Stephen asked. He was the perfect example of someone who had been reared in luxury and was sheltered. "Don't worry, I'm not that cunning," I said, grinning a little. I knew they would soon enough meet their own demise, so I didn't need to punish them. Stephen and I separated. I moved in with my mom at our new home following the divorce. To provide my mom with a quiet recovery, the house was made barrier-free. I was satisfied that aid would be readily accessible because it was near to the hospital. Stephen and Julia were living in the old house when they were married. As Julia's belly expanded, Stephen had to drive her for more than an hour to have checks because there were no hospitals in the area. In a normal world, their marriage may have been happy. Stephen gave me a call after some time. "Hey, why do we have to leave the house?" So, I thought, this is the day at last. "Did your uncle come?" "Indeed, he did. Did you know and keep it a secret from me?" he asked. The younger brother of Stephen's father was his uncle. "Oh, Stephen, you should have known the house is owned by your uncle." It seems that Stephen had been residing there as though it were his own, having forgotten that. Before we were married, I had discovered, when visiting Stephen's family, that Stephen's uncle, his brother, had been given the house by their father as he lay dying. It seems that even though Stephen was the heir, people didn't trust him enough to pass on the wealth. Stephen was residing there with his uncle's permission. I totally forgot about it, but my uncle showed up out of the blue yesterday and informed your wife we were selling this land. Why did you withhold this crucial information from me? Hearing that, I couldn't help but laugh inside, thinking Stephen's uncle is quite an actor. I disclosed all the factors leading to our divorce to Stephen's uncle. He was enraged and vowed to let Stephen know how he felt. He got Julia pregnant right before I was going to tell Stephen about the house being sold. Perhaps I should let them solve this one on their own, I reasoned. Isn't that all right? Since you have plenty of money, you can relocate anywhere, right? I inquired. Ah, about that. Stephen's tone darkened abruptly. I feigned not to know what he was about to say. What happened? I no longer hold the office of president. My uncle stated that the staff wouldn't follow me since I was untrustworthy. He advised me to reapply as a regular employee, so my pay will be halved. Oh? Really? I said. But Stephen's uncle told me all of this before. Julia is enraged. She intended to transform the home into an expansive mansion. After learning yesterday night that we had to leave the house and that my pay had been cut, she hasn't talked to me since. How should I proceed? Stephen sounded very close to tears. Julia was obviously with him for the money. Well, I can't help you with that anymore, so you'll have to figure it out yourself? Wait. Stephen attempted to stop me, but I ended the conversation casually. Julia called a bit later. Knowing what she would undoubtedly say, I didn't want to answer, but I assumed she would call again and again. Thus, I regretfully chose to pick up only to hear Julia's annoying voice. Bella, you are to blame. I believed I had married a wealthy man, Julia charged. I was no longer concerned about her predicted answer. Stevie is a wonderful spouse, isn't he? At least he's working, I retorted. I find it inconceivable. You withheld from me the fact that you knew we had to leave the house. How unjust that is, Julia cried out. What may have occurred if I had informed you sooner? If your life hadn't been ideal, would you have left him? Wouldn't that be unfair to the infant? My response rendered Julia mute. Whatever your circumstances, you are now beginning a family. I gave you some advice to gather yourself. I said before hanging up. I have no resentment over Stephen's passing. I just discovered that I was blind to males. Julia's parents, who were unhappy about their marriage but took them in for the benefit of their newborn grandson, forced Stephen and Julia to move in with them. Stephen, Julia, and their child arrived at my house years later. They didn't know my new address, but they had managed to locate me. Bella, are you there? Julia stormed in, calling out. With her usual arrogant tone, she said, We were nearby for our child's kindergarten admission results and thought we'd drop by. Even as a mother, she maintained her glamorous appearance. Even though I didn't want to meet her, I chose to be courteous. So, how did it go? With a fake interest, I inquired. Our child got into the top kindergarten in the area, Julia exalted herself. Well done, I said, sensing she was trying to boast. Yes, this child is outstanding, just like his father, and he made a great impression at the interview, Julia went on to say. Oh, that's nice, I half-jokingly said. Julia scowled at me after noticing my tone. To be honest, I really believed that I would suffer as a result of someone. But today, our family is happy. It's wonderful to start a family and get married, she remarked. Stephen eventually said, Yeah, that's right, as he stood silently behind her. Their son, who bore a striking resemblance to Julia, fixed me with the same pretentious glare. So, are you still alone? Julia spoke with contempt. Alone? I shot back right away. I'm already remarried. Julia and Stephen seemed stunned. You're not telling the truth. This is the home you shared with your mother, right? Yes, but my spouse and I also reside here, I responded, right as my spouse Jacob showed in. I invited them inside by saying, "Please come in." Jacob's appearance startled them. "Ah, you must be the parents of Michael, who came for the interview recently," stated Jacob after recognizing them. "It was me who conducted the interview. I ought to have made my introduction sooner. Wilson Kindergarten's principal is myself, Jacob Wilson." When Stephen and Julia learned that Jacob was my husband and the kindergarten principal, they were shocked. "You're the principal of a prestigious private kindergarten, and you're married to Bella?" Julia questioned, her voice brimming with suspicion. "That's true," Jacob said with confirmation. "It's unbelievable that someone like you married the principal of such a prestigious institution." Julia scoffed. "Is that even someone you met somewhere?" Since our past, I had made a lot of effort to better myself, so Julia's contempt no longer bothered me. Our professional connections brought us together. The rebuilding of the kindergarten was given to my business. I was impressed by how hard Bella worked, so I initiated our relationship, Jacob said with a hint of shyness. "Let me introduce you properly," I said. "This is my ex-husband Stephen and his wife Julia, who was my once closest companion and took him from me." "Please don't introduce us in that manner," Julia said, "and don't say such things in front of the child." Facing the kindergarten principal where their child was set to start, the couple appeared ashamed and agitated. Finding out about their complex family history must have been distressing, given it was a renowned private kindergarten. "So, about the admission. Has it been dismissed?" Julia said tremblingly. After a moment of keeping a severe look, Jacob retorted, "Let's see how your child responds to the kindergarten environment. He's now admitted." Although Stephen and Julia were relieved, it appeared that they were still unaware of how difficult kindergarten life might be. Their encounter proved to be a complete failure. There was a powerful parent network at the kindergarten, so any unfavorable word circulated fast. News of Julia's kidnapping of my ex-husband, the principal's wife, went viral among the kindergarten parents who prioritized strict instruction. Before long, Stephen and Julia were cut off from the other parents. Michael, their innocent youngster, was impacted by this sort of conduct. He sobbed every day, expressing his want to stop kindergarten, and was teased by his peers. Michael was eventually forced out of the family by Stephen and Julia, and they were no longer in our lives. Jacob then found out that Michael's family had to enroll him in a public kindergarten with another kindergarten principal. Unfortunately, there too, the same myths proliferated. They thus found themselves in a poorer position within the society. They eventually left Michael at home and vanished. It was recently brought to my attention that Julia's parents were showing up to kindergarten pickups and activities to win over the neighbors and make sure Michael could attend kindergarten without difficulty. It appeared that Julia's once indulgent parents had given up on her, opting to raise Michael on their own. Although hearing this from Jacob reassured me, I was still worried about Michael. Julia's parents eventually showed up there to offer their condolences for everything. "I apologize so much for the delayed response. Julia flatly refused to accompany us, even though we really wanted her to." Julia had gone back to her parents' place, which startled me. I believed that Stephen and she had vanished. Her parents claimed that only Julia left to go back home when Stephen and Julia split because they were unable to live in poverty. Michael, on the other hand, did not accept her return and no longer saw her as a mother. As time passed, I gave birth to our eagerly anticipated daughter. Here at the local maternity hospital, I met a lot of new people. I had severed my friendship with a childhood buddy, but I now like hanging out with other mothers who are in similar circumstances. While on paternity leave, Jacob has been a great dad. Right now, I think I'm happier than I've ever been. I intend to enjoy parenthood in the company of a loving family and close friends, just as my mother did when raising me on her own. I will love my daughter unconditionally, have faith in her and the people in her life, and most of all, forgive myself for my previous transgressions. From now on, I promise to live a